Today we're going to talk about dynamic microphones, condenser microphones, ribbon microphones, cardioid, supercardioid, hypercardioid, figure eight, omnidirectional.
What the hell is even that?
Hang tight. Hello everyone and welcome to WaveSpot. My name is Austin Knaus and I've spent the last 2 decades working with audio. My goal for this channel is to share all the fundamentals that I've learned along the way and hopes to give you a fast track to understanding the world of sound. So, let's dive in. Recording audio is just as much an art as it is a science. Every microphone is different, just like every person's voice is different. A microphone that I use for my voice might not sound as good for your voice. A male voice might be deeper than a female's voice, and we would want to choose a different microphone for each application. We might not use the same microphone for a voice recording as we do to record a guitar. Every microphone is different. Every application is different. It's a stylistic choice. It's an artistic choice when it comes to actually recording and getting the tonalities that you want out of them. I'll cover all of the basics here, but at the end of the day, it's an individualistic choice. Everybody's different. Everybody has a different taste. Every microphone is different. Every microphone has a different flavor. There are 3 different microphone types that we're going to talk about today: dynamic, condenser, and ribbon microphones. So let's jump into dynamic. What's a dynamic microphone? You can think of a dynamic microphone as your stereotypical live performance microphone. Take the Shure SM58 for example. It's probably the most iconic dynamic microphone for live performance. How a dynamic microphone works is there is a magnet that has a coil wrapped around it, and that coil is connected to a diaphragm. And whenever you talk into the microphone, it vibrates the diaphragm, which moves the coil over a magnet, and that's how we create an electrical signal that gets into our audio interface. Now, an audio interface can supply 48-volt phantom power, but a dynamic microphone is completely passive. It doesn't require any power in order to operate. It moves purely by brute force of your voice or whatever audio you're trying to record. Dynamic microphones handle high sound pressure environments as well as noisy environments as well, because they're not as susceptible. They're also not as susceptible to background noise, which makes them ideal for live performance or recording drums, very loud instrument, or miking up a guitar cab, another very loud instrument. Some good use cases for a dynamic microphone are live performance, recording drum sets, and miking up a guitar cab. They're also good for broadcasting and podcasting. Think of the Joe Rogan podcast. He uses an SM7B, and that's probably the most iconic podcasting microphone, and it's also dynamic. Fun fact, it was also used to record Michael Jackson's Thriller. Next, let's get into condenser microphones. So, what is a condenser microphone? Where a dynamic microphone uses the brute force of the air pressure to move the diaphragm, a condenser microphone utilizes 48-volt phantom power to charge a capacitor inside of the microphone. Think about a little battery supplying charge to the microphone. Since it's charged, it doesn't rely on the brute force. It's waiting for any audio signal to come through, and it's going to amplify it. Condenser microphones are used when precision is needed. They're often used in a highly controlled studio environment. Condenser microphones are so sensitive that you can hear somebody's tongue hit the back of their teeth when they're talking. Where a dynamic microphone is like a hammer, a condenser microphone is like a scalpel. One of my favorite condenser microphones is a Neumann TLM-103. The first time I heard that microphone, I was confused whether I was listening to myself talk or listening to my thoughts. It was very precise. It was very, very accurate. It sounded like I was talking inside my head. Some of a condenser microphone's strengths are in the fine details of audio recording. When detail matters, get a condenser. Some good use cases for condenser microphones are studio vocal recordings or voiceovers, acoustic instruments, ASMR. They can even be used for overhead drum mics or to capture ambient noise in a room. Next, we'll talk about ribbon microphones. These are often called the vintage sounding microphones because of their warm character. They're often very good at taking very shrilly high-pitched sounds and making them sound lush and smooth on the top end. The Royer R121 is a very renowned ribbon microphone. It was used from the Foo Fighters to Green Day, from Lana Del Rey to Aerosmith. Very versatile, very smooth sounding. Ribbon microphones are mostly passive, and a lot of the times 48 volt phantom power can actually damage the ribbon. But there are a few models that require 48 volt phantom power, so be very cautious and read the directions for your microphone before you just go plugging it in, because you might spend a lot of money on a microphone and just destroy it. A ribbon microphone uses a very, very thin ribbon of metal between two magnets, where the dynamic microphone uses a coil wrapped around a magnet tied to a diaphragm. The ribbon itself is how we get our signal. Ribbon microphones are very smooth, lush, warm. They're very good at taming the high-end harshness of a lot of things like cymbals or sibilants. They primarily capture in a figure 8 pattern, which we'll get into in a little bit. Some good use cases for ribbon microphones are smooth, vintage-style vocal recordings, recording guitar cabs or orchestral. They sound phenomenal on piano, and they can even be used for overhead microphones or to capture the room noise. So those are going to be the three main types of microphones that we're going to be utilizing in a studio environment: dynamic, condenser, and ribbon. If you're learning something, make sure to give this video a like. It really helps my channel get promoted to people like you. The next thing that we're going to talk about are polar patterns, or a polar plot. A polar plot is a graph with a 360-degree view that represents a microphone's ability to capture sound, with 0 degrees being at the very front of the microphone. The first polar pattern we're going to talk about is cardioid. A cardioid polar pattern means that the microphone captures everything in front of the microphone and nothing out of the rear of the microphone. A cardioid polar pattern is probably going to be the most common polar pattern you're going to see between condenser and dynamic microphones. They're really good when you need to capture things up front and there's moderate background noise happening in the environment. Next is the supercardioid polar pattern. Very similar to the cardioid polar pattern, the supercardioid polar pattern has a more narrow radius at the front of the microphone and becomes a little bit more sensitive at the back of the microphone. It is good in noisy environments when you need a little bit more focus on what's happening in front of the microphone. They're very common in condenser and dynamic microphones alike, and become a more specialized application rather than just a standard cardioid. Here is a 3D representation of the difference between a cardioid and a supercardioid polar pattern. Next is the hypercardioid polar pattern, a more focused version of the supercardioid polar pattern. It's more often found in dynamic microphones and very few condenser microphones. It is considered a specialty application when it comes to very noisy environments, as its off-axis rejection is almost at 90 degrees. This means it's really good for live performance applications. Next is the figure 8 or bi-directional polar pattern. It picks up equally in the back as it does in the front. It is very good for stereo recordings or face-to-face interviews when sitting across from somebody. This is the standard pickup pattern for ribbon microphones and is very common in condenser microphones, but very seldomly will you ever see a dynamic microphone with a figure 8 polar pattern. Next, we have the Omni-Directional microphone. These microphones can pick up a 360-degree pickup around the microphone. Essentially, it gets everything. These are really good for room mics or group recordings where you have a bunch of singers in a circle and they're all around the microphone. They're more often found in condenser microphones, but some dynamic microphones can also be found in the omnidirectional pattern. They're great for picking up the environment around you. If you want more detailed information, head over to wavespot.com. I have much greater detail written in a blog post over there. If you're learning something, make sure to give this video a like. It really helps out the channel. So as you can see, not only do microphones come in dynamic, condenser, or ribbon microphones, they come in cardioid, supercardioid, hypercardioid, figure 8, and omnidirectional as well. There's a lot of different flavors, a lot of different styles of microphones to do a plethora of different types of recordings. So while cardioid style microphones pick up just in the front, figure 8 picks up front and back, but it completely rejects the sides, making them good for stereo. Omnidirectional microphones are good for ambient noise or room microphones. So there's different applications for different styles of pickup patterns. So now let's talk about some common mistakes people make when recording. The first one we're going to talk about is clipping. What is clipping? Clipping is when we hit our maximum threshold of volume for a particular channel. For example, if we were using a computer or a mixing console, there's an upper limit to how much we can push it. Looking at this sine wave, we can see that the bottom half of the image starts to flatten out, or the tops and the bottoms are chopped off. This isn't an accurate audio signal anymore. It starts to distort and it starts to become really bad sounding. Let's jump into the computer really quick. So you can see this is my voice going through the microphone. Now what happens if it starts to clip? So this is what my voice sounds like when my microphone is clipping. This means that my volume is way too high and it needs to turn down. We can hear the different artifacts that come across in my voice. And for an extreme example, this is what it would sound like if I was really clipping. A lot of the times we see this in memes.
Daddy, chill.
This is a major example of clipping. This is really bad. I would not recommend ever clipping your audio. Keeping clean audio is really important. A good rule of thumb is to be anywhere between -18 and -6 dB inside the DAW. This is the sweet spot, if you will. It gives you enough headroom that you don't clip, but it's also not too quiet. The next thing we're going to talk about is this thing right here in front of my mouth. This is called a pop filter. What this does is it prevents plosives from hitting the microphone. What is a plosive? A plosive is a P sound or a B sound or a T sound or a K or a B, D, K, P. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. P. It prevents my P sound, the air, from hitting the microphone and me just hitting my stand. This leads us into the next thing. The next thing that we're going to talk about is a shock mount. I don't have one because my microphone didn't come with one and I didn't want to order one, and I'm not constantly hitting my microphone. If I was tapping my foot on the ground, you can hear that in the recording. If I had a shock mount, this would decouple the microphone from the stand, or decouple the microphone from the table or the ground or whatever it is connected to. It suspends it in midair. So if I tap my foot, it doesn't actually transmit through the stand into the microphone, thus tainting the recording. The next thing that we're going to talk about is room noise. Now, this took me a long time to understand, so I'm hoping that I can get the point across very quickly for you. Your room is very important because, simple physics, sound moves at 1130 feet per second. Bounces off hard surfaces like walls, like a chaotic bouncy ball flying throughout the room. Now, if I were to move away from the microphone and talk back over here, this is just the sound of my voice reflecting off the walls. This is the sound of my voice directly into the microphone. Now that I showed you that, you'll probably hear the echo in the room. So not only is the microphone picking up my voice directly, but it's also picking up the reflections of the room. You can buy a $99 microphone in a very echoey room and it's gonna sound bad. Now if you go and spend $2,500 on a microphone, it's gonna sound even worse. Believe it or not, that microphone's gonna pick up even more room noise. So acoustic treatment is very important. This stuff is acoustical foam. And if I move it to right here, we can start to hear how my voice begins to sound less roomy. It sounds a lot more precise than if I were to have it out in the open. Even though I don't recommend loading your room up with this stuff, anything is better than nothing. If you can't afford it, then go record in a closet full of clothes, or build a blanket fort around you, or even just put a blanket over your head. If I'm far away from the microphone, we can hear my room a lot more. If I'm close to the microphone, we can hear my voice directly, but we can also still hear a lot of the room too. Now, as crazy as it looks, and as crazy as you may think I am, this helps a lot. even though I have a blanket over my head, it still removes a lot of the extra background noise in the room. It's only crazy if it doesn't work. If you found any of this information valuable, leave a like and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I release a new video every Monday morning. If you're learning something new, or if you still have questions, leave a comment below and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you want to read more on the topic, head over to wavespot.com where I have more detailed information and all of today's illustrations written in a blog post. And until next time, thanks for watching.